Everyone, and welcome to Matter's signature Tales from the Trenches series, which is a program we produce together with Village MD. I'm Stephen Collins, the CEO of Matter. We are a healthcare technology incubator and an innovation hub with a mission to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. Tales from the Trenches is our longest standing event series at Matter, where accomplished healthcare entrepreneurs share their journeys from how they got started to what they've learned along the way. Today, we'll be joined by Don Brown, who's the CEO and founder of LifeOmic. Dr. Don Brown is a serial entrepreneur who's founded 7 startups, brought 3 of them to successful exit. He sold his first company to General Motors, sold another one to IBM. 2016, he sold a company called Interactive Intelligence to Genesys for $1.4 billion. And instead of retiring, then at age 60, he started another company, LifeOmic, putting his medical degree, which he got in 1985, finally putting that to use. So we'll hear more about LifeOmic and the journey that got Don to this point in his career shortly. Thanks so much, Don, for joining us.
My pleasure.
We are fortunate to produce this series together with Village MD, which is a Chicago-based company that designs and implements innovative value-based care models in communities around the country. 6 months ago, they announced an additional $5.2 billion investment from Walgreens, with plans to add 1,000 primary care clinics over the next 5 years, more than half of those in medically underserved communities. Dr. Elise Singer, who's Village MD's National Medical Director, will moderate the conversation with Don. Elise is a family physician, a geriatrician, a healthcare executive, and an entrepreneur. Notably, she was a co-founder of Doximity, which went public last year. She also advises a number of startups and growth stage companies, including one called Canopy, which is a Matter member company that recently came out of stealth mode with $13 million of financing, some really terrific data, and a number of leading cancer treatment centers as clients. So Doctors Brown and Singer, thank you so much for joining us today. And Elise, the Zoom is yours.
Great, thanks. So Don, that was kind of, point by point what you'd see on paper about your background, but we're rarely exactly the people we are on paper. I'd love to hear from you kind of the real story, as to how you started and got to where you are today. Let's start there.
Well, I grew up as a kid, always wanting to be a scientist. I revered scientists. I think partly my parents came from deep Appalachia. They both stopped their education at the 8th grade, and my mother just instilled the value of education in me, and I started reading science fiction books and was just captivated. So, I went to college thinking, I'm going to do something that takes me down that path. And I got an undergraduate degree in physics, and then enrolled in MD PhD program with a PhD part in biochemistry. Thinking that I'd be working at some, basement lab at Eli Lilly or someplace like that. But I ended up switching to computer science as I was finishing up medical school, started a little software company, and took a detour into the enterprise software industry for the next few decades. So I'll take a breath there. That's just kind of a quick overview of kind of my strange path.
No, I mean, that's amazing. A Renaissance man, educational. I mean, really, that right there, you've touched more parts of the world than many people do. So computer science related to healthcare?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I started the original company. I had a buddy who had with his dad, a string of car dealerships, and he asked me to write a program to compute finance payments. So I did that. We ended up selling that to EDS and General Motors. And I started, pardon me, another company called Software Artistry, that used some of the, in grad school, I'd done some work on AI and expert systems. And so that company leveraged that and ultimately became the first software company in the state of Indiana ever to go public. But unfortunately, no, none of, I started several companies, and until this one, none had been in healthcare. And so LifeOmic has been kind of a chance for me to close the circle in my life, to get back into the life sciences.
Okay. So before we move into healthcare, then let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial background. I mean, you go to medical school. I don't know if you had debt or not, but like that's a lot of years of your life. You are deep in a space. You had some computer science background, but you pursue a car, right?
Yeah.
So that right there is actually not only interesting, but unexpected. I mean, I would say, so I've been an entrepreneur too. And, how do you find the idea? What do you pursue? That's a really big question. You're about to put 5, 10 years of your life. If you succeed, right,
Yeah.
you could have an exit like you've had. So I'd love to hear some of your thinking at that time. And was that the right decision when you're so deep and expert in something to pursue something else? I mean, clearly you love business, right? And are entrepreneurial. So you've got that. But yeah, let's hear about that.
Yeah, I came to love business. At the time, I didn't know anything about business. My dad was an Army sergeant, and like I said, I was planning to be a scientist. I really got lucky in that first one because I was paired with a domain expert. So my buddy, he knew the problem that needed to be solved. In this case, a finance system for car dealers, and so I could be the technical expert. And so I was the programming department. I probably wrote close to 1 million lines of Pascal code. So that's the ideal pairing. When you've got somebody who has a problem, he had the problem in his own business. And fortunately, it was a general enough problem that we were then able to start a business and sell it to others. But he was the one, as I was, concluding medical school, starting to think about fellowships or, other things that I might do. He said, why don't you just give this a try? Give me 2 years and let's see what happens. And, that's dangerous in life. As you say, 2 years can turn into 5 or 10. Fortunately, we got lucky, and it turns out that General Motors had charged EDS with building something like this. But as often happens in the tech industry, EDS had the disadvantage of having 100 people, and I had 1. And so, or 2 with my buddy. So we were able to just move much more quickly, and finally GM forced CDS to buy us.
Okay. So the right domain expert, and you had a problem that you were getting after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the right way to start a company that I stumbled into. I mean, I take no credit for it, and I didn't know at all what I was doing. So, but that is the right way. And so when we sold that company, I got something like $800,000. I thought I was the richest man in the world, that I would be able to retire. And yet I foolishly thought I could fund another business. And so I started that second company, and I started that company in the worst possible way, which is no specific problem, no idea, no specific idea, just thinking that, well, it worked out the first time, then I must have the Midas touch, and surely it'll work out the second time. So I quickly learned, after we burnt through money and were maxed out on credit cards and everything, I learned the value of focus at that company and identifying a specific problem, which we did. As I said, we used some of my AI work to create a corporate help desk solution that we sold to Bank of America and a lot of big companies. But we had to kind of wander through the wilderness for a couple of years before we realized, we need a specific problem. We need to build a specific solution. And so when we did that, then the company took off and, as I say, went public and was later acquired by IBM and folded into their Tivoli division.
Okay, so I'd love to hear about that wandering in the desert a little, because it's a time that a lot of entrepreneurs face where there's something there, but also you haven't quite nailed it, and you can keep iterating, listening to the customer, trying to find it, or you can call it, and it's painful to take a baby and leave it out in the cold to die. Or have it. I mean, not to be like terrible, but that's how it feels.
That's exactly how it feels. You are exactly right. So, at that second company, at Software Artistry, what I really learned was the difference between a tool and a solution. Right. So at first I thought, well, I've built this, done some work on expert systems in grad school. I'll build what's called an inference engine, an expert system inference engine that can take a knowledge base and lead somebody through like a diagnostic session or, it was, very primitive AI that we did it at the time. But I thought, we'll wrap this up and we'll sell it. And then companies can use it to build whatever they want. And so the dangerous thing about a tool like that is that everybody you go to says, yeah, that's interesting. We'll have to look at that. And so you get lulled into this sense that, oh, we're onto something here. But then you find nobody buys. Everybody kind of kicks the tires a little bit. And so what we belatedly realized is that what we need to do is sell these people something that they recognize. Inference engine, expert system inference engine isn't in their budget. They don't have a budget line for this tool, but they do have a budget line. And actually, we settled on two domains. One was for the car dealer finance application that I mentioned. The other, we thought we could use this to build a labor scheduler, which was a huge problem. So what we found was we had two opportunities, but we didn't have the money to explore both. And one was a bigger opportunity, the labor scheduler, but would require much more work and was higher risk. And the help desk market was more focused, smaller, but less risk. And so you talk about kind of leaving the baby outside. That's what we had to do with the labor scheduler. We had to kind of axe that part of the business, lay off some people, cut back. And then once we did that and focused on the help desk, then the company took off.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. So not entirely luck. just going to point that out.
There's always an element of luck, but
100%. But recognizing opportunity, knowing when there isn't opportunity, that's a lot of the work you've done. So let's move towards healthcare. I mean, you're still a doctor this whole time.
Yes.
Tell me how you got back into healthcare.
Well, I knew there was something wrong with me because I would go home, I'm the CEO. Then I started another company after Software Artistry called Interactive Intelligence, that went public and grew to about 2,200 people. So with both those companies, I found that when I would go home at night, I wouldn't grab a business book or a trade magazine. I would grab a molecular biology book, and start leafing through, DNA error correction and, bizarre things like that. and this went on, I think, for a few years, and but it just felt so random, that there was no focus. I wasn't really learning anything, but it was fun because during this time, much of this time, there was the Human Genome Project that was going on, and so I just watched with fascination as biology and ultimately healthcare on top of it became an information science. And so ultimately, I stunned my kids, as Elise and I were talking about. I've got 8. And I said, guys, I'm going back to school. I said, what the hell, Dad? Why would you want to? I said, I would really like to catch up. So much has changed. I don't feel that old, but since 1985, when I graduated from medical school, think of what we've learned about genomics and immunology and, countless subjects. So anyways, I enrolled in a master's program in biotechnology at Johns Hopkins. I was, twice the age of the next oldest person in every class. As grandpa out in Utah, and I'm a very competitive guy. So I had to get the highest grade in every class, especially since I'm competing against these young East Coast hot shots. But it was wonderful. It really rekindled that flame in me, that love for the life sciences, and I just began to see how this combination of AI, what I've been working on at my companies, cloud technologies, big data processing, and the advances in science could combine to really move the needle in terms of healthcare.
And so you come out of school, I assume you start a company, right? Or what?
Well, so, I'm going through this program. I don't think I was quite finished, but, I'd taken molecular biology, cell biology, biochemistry, immunology, advanced immunology, and just getting more and more excited. And so, but still, I'm the CEO of a publicly traded company. I remember going and giving some, address in Australia at some big conference, then going back to my hotel room and taking a test. In cell biology or something. I thought, what the hell am I doing? But I didn't know what I was going to do with it. This is, very much a personal indulgence for me. But then a big California company came along and made an offer to Interactive Intelligence to acquire it for $1.4 billion. And I thought, this is my chance. It was funny. We had a board meeting, and I initially recommended to my board that we turn down the offer, that we keep on going with that company. And one of my board members pushed back his chair, was quiet for a second. He said, Don, yeah, you could keep on going, but why would you want to? And he said something that felt like a bucket of water, cold water had been poured on me. He said, dude, you won. Lay down the sword. You don't have to keep battling here anymore. And it was like he gave me permission, to stop. As an entrepreneur, you just get into this battle mentality that I've got to keep going, we've got to keep winning. And especially as a public company, you've got the quarterly pressure of making numbers. And boy, you can just get locked into this mode, where you're just going to keep running through walls because that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. And sometimes knowing when to stop, when to say, okay, this is good enough for this effort is really important. I mean, because you can have bad judgment. I mean, how many entrepreneurs have built companies and then failed to see changes and have run them into the ground because they're just too stubborn to give up or change. And our stubbornness is great, at some points, but it can really blind us to realities. So fortunately, I had a good board, and they said, sleep on it. But, if you want to continue, we'll support you. But dude, if you do, you're nuts, because they knew that I had other things that I wanted to do. And so I came back the next day and I was excited, and I said, I, I agree. And so we announced the sale of Interactive Intelligence, and the day it closed, I announced the formation of LifeOmic. So it was my chance to, now I can maybe make use of, some of this knowledge, and, see if I can make a small difference.
Okay, so you brought up a few themes that I want to talk about a little. So this idea of doing two things at once is something I've personally experienced, and sounds like you have too. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say is a norm for entrepreneurs. So I have a story when this is kind of like being a doctor, life, making a change. I was thinking about business school in a way to shed my MD. So I've still been practicing, but in a way that deep expertise can really hold you back because people see you at the table just in a certain way. Sometimes you want to be seen in a different way. And this doesn't have to be just for professional degrees. But so I said, okay, very last minute, I'm going to go ahead and apply to business school. And I only applied to Stanford and Haas. I was late in life at that point. I was like, if I do this, kind of like you were, it's because I want to, and for this reason. And so I was literally in labor with my third child, and I had the GMATs coming up. And so my husband was like packing up the bag, and I was like, remember the GMAT book, and literally doing my math work to then sit 2 weeks later for, where it wasn't the hotel room, it was the hospital for me. But yeah, I had a flashback there of doing surprising things at surprising times.
You're a tough lady. That's far tougher than anything I did.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but so two things at once. And then anyway, I had another thought, but I'll let you keep going. So LifeOmic. So did you have that kind of baked as you were coming out? Or did you say, this is the space I'm going to be in, and I'm going to figure it out? And I think that probably some of the folks listening would love to understand your thoughts on that. So we've heard about, and I want to get to team too, so don't let me forget, but we've heard about domain experts. Well, now you've demonstrated you've got a lot of the expertise at the table. I'm sure you're still partnering with experts, and this idea of problem. So I'm sure that part of your answer will be, you knew that this convergence space was going to go somewhere, but it's different to like your first endeavor where there was a problem that you were getting right after, than saying, hey, here's an opportunity in a space that I know exists, but where's that problem, and then finding it.
Yeah, I mean, you're very astute. It's exactly right. And I freely admit that I I threw out all my experience, everything I knew was right, and I just jumped into this one and did it the wrong way, which I admitted from the beginning. It's with no clear idea, but some money to burn. So that was kind of the basis for LifeOmic. I mean, I knew about this space, and as you say, the confluence of all these trends, and I felt there would be many opportunities, but I didn't have a specific problem to solve. I just wanted to jump in. Our initial thought was, we'll do something around DNA sequencing. So, so I hired a team. I had several of my senior engineers from Interactive Intelligence who came to me and said, "We're coming with you. We're not asking permission. We're coming." And I said, "Guys, I don't even know what the hell we're going to do. So we don't care. We'll figure it out together." So, so I put together a team, and I hired some bioinformaticians and genomicists. And so we had an initial meeting out here in Park City at my house, 12 or so of us, probably 4 kind of genomics experts, 8 or so computer science experts. And there was fear every place, in everybody's eyes. The developers, I joke, they couldn't spell DNA. And so, the genomicists are talking about, all the cool stuff that we could do. And the software guys are just going, oh my God, what the heck have I gotten myself into? But we came out of it with the rough idea that we will buy a couple of the biggest, baddest Illumina sequencers, the then new NovaSeqs, and we'll set up a CLIA certified lab and start doing whole genome sequencing. And of course, for that, we're going to need software. And so the software guys will build a platform to take, the whole genome sequence is roughly 100 gigabytes of information. So, the software guys would build the software, the pipeline, to do something with the genomic information. And the science team, we'll have another team working on the CLIA lab. And so that was the initial idea. Shall I go on?
I think so. I think that it would probably be really instructive to folks to hear how you went from, okay, I'm in the right space. You're different in that you had funding and could bring that team together to get going, but just leaving that aside, because there are ways to kind of hack that, right? Like, let's just leave that a moment. And so where'd you go from there and how'd you get there?
So 6 months or so later, the software stuff is going great. Our developers have learned how to spell DNA. They've learned how to structure, how to ingest whole genome sequences, kind of ingest them into a data lake. They've created a little workflow pipeline to be able to even do variant calls and stuff like that. But we're mired over on the lab side. And I'm coming to realize that the whole genome sequencing is kind of a commodity, and it's going to be a race to the bottom. The Chinese are starting to offer whole genome sequencing for less than our cost of reagents. And so I went to we were just across the street from my alma mater, the Indiana University School of Medicine. I said, guys, do you want to buy a couple of sequencers on the cheap? And so we sold them at a loss. We shut down. So it's kind of similar to my previous business. We kind of shut down that part of the operation. Fortunately, it was pretty small. And we decided, let's just stick to what we know. Most of us, including myself, really come from the software industry. And so let's focus on that. And so we started working with the School of Medicine. They had a project that they call the Precision Health Initiative, or PHI. And it was several cancer teams that were looking to really understand prostate cancer, triple negative breast cancer, others at a molecular level, at a understanding exactly what mutations are driving the cancer, and then trying to offer precision therapy. And so they had conceptualized something that they called a data commons. They were seeing it as a big database where they could ingest, electronic medical records, information from wearable devices, omics data, everything. Put it into a massive data lake, and then being able to, kind of magically do analyses. And we said, what you really want is a cloud platform to do that. Because in the cloud, we can bring to bear massive amounts of computing power, essentially infinite storage. And so we worked with them, and we built a platform that we call the Precision Health Cloud that allows them what used to take a couple of weeks, they could do in a couple of hours. But say a woman comes in newly diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, they can load her germline sequence, the DNA she was born with, the sequence from the cancer, and we can help them identify the genes. There may be thousands, millions of specific changes in the genome, but generally there's a handful, sometimes one or two genes that are really responsible for the proliferation. They kind of set the snowball rolling down the hill. And it's critical to identify those because more and more we can find very precise ways of targeting those mutations, either through immunotherapy or through even existing FDA-approved drugs. And so that's what we started doing, working with the School of Medicine, building out that platform.
Okay, so it sounds like at this point, you understand that data is going to be useful, probably can be monetized. There's a need because you found, a group who are already doing this and you furthered it. How do you come up with a business model? I mean, how are you going to do something with that platform? How did your team process and actually find customers, learn enough? I mean, I guess now you, in a way, have a domain expert. You have your medical center who would understand something about that potentially, but often actually universities and medical groups are notorious for having valuable assets they don't recognize can be monetized. So they don't necessarily have that answer. If they did, they probably would be doing it without you, or maybe, right? So how did you get to, I have an asset, I'm going to turn this into a business, what that business is going to be?
So initially, really for the first, 3 years of the company, we're only 5 years old, we really just focused on building that platform. I said, we're really not worried. We'll figure out some way to monetize this later. Right now, we have a chance to work with some of the leading cancer researchers in the world, and IU has just some fantastic people. One person we worked with in particular is Professor Milan Radovich. He's now heading research at Caris. But just a great collaboration. And so Milan, his team, some of the other teams at the School of Medicine gave us very specific input about the sorts of visualizations that they needed, cohort definition tools. And so it was great because the platform just kept getting richer and richer and richer. And we built in support for the common workflow language, for Docker containers, AI and machine learning capabilities. So we really just worked with initially the School of Medicine. We negotiated a deal so that we were getting some revenue from this engagement. So that was the initial focus. We're just going to build a platform, and others can build businesses, whatever applications on top of it. We found that people would look at the platform and go, "It's cool, but I want to see something." And so we realized, okay, we're going to have to invest in some of the eye candy. Some of the kind of put an interface on top of this. And so we did that so that we could ingest, medical records from Cerner and Epic, OCR capabilities, so we could ingest faxes. It's unbelievable how much fax is still used in healthcare in 2022. We've got one company doing like 1 million pages a day or something crazy. So the platform kept getting richer. We started going around and marketing the platform itself, and we've got device and software companies building their businesses on top of the platform, using that as just like we built ours on top of Amazon Web Services. So now we're kind of a layer on top of AWS. That other startups, other companies can use, with an open API, and they can build their own applications on top. So that was the initial focus on, in terms of marketing. But then, as often happens, in building a platform, then you start to say, well, I can take that all the way on up to the solution level in this area. Right. And so that's what we started to do. In addition to the platform, we started building solutions that we could go out and market for things like patient engagement and recovery after a procedure. So we've got, healthcare systems that, instead of after a surgery giving you some sort of folder with a bunch of poorly copied documents, they can define a recovery plan, and it just shows up on your phone as a to-do list every day, of take this medication or do this exercise, and here's a video of how to do it, or take a picture of your incision so that we can monitor for infection, those sorts of things. So, once you have that basic platform, it's incredible kind of the number of directions you can go, as I say, both selling the platform itself, but building specific solutions on top.
Yeah, I love this theme. So startups die of indigestion, not starvation. I think that you can build this platform, and a problem that some entrepreneurs, many I suspect, have, is that the vision is so clear and the myriad opportunities, it just seems like possibility. But I think for some people, especially your customers, your buying customers, that is very quickly just either overwhelming or irrelevant, even if it's not to them, if they don't have it specific as to how that maps from here's this platform, here's what we could do, to a need that they have. Putting two and two together isn't their strength, it's our strength sometimes. And so I love how you approached this in the sense that you knew there was a space, you got the platform asset in place, but then very importantly, you mentioned, how did you communicate it? So you realized you needed to do that in a way that others were going to understand what you had built, that they could see, that they could understand, is really important. And frankly, is the core of marketing in early stage, much more so than, say, advertising or number crunching and all, which is relevant later. But just how do you communicate what it is? And then you mentioned that you had specific solutions in which you just ran through. And sometimes, building for somebody something that you see the need, it doesn't mean that you're forever going to be in the business of building that bridge across. I mean, maybe you do get to AWS where you are just that platform, and then folks will come and build on top of it. But to start, I don't actually know the story in cloud servers, how that went down, but I suspect there might have been a similar situation there, where you really do have to get really explicit and sometimes build all the way out for that customer so that others can see how you verticalize on top of that.
You're exactly right. So, in this case, our solutions that we build are, we can turn around and say, this is what you can do, because we're using the same platform, we're using the same APIs. And so this is a great example of the possibilities. The other interesting thing I think we did is really just kind of an accident. During my studies at Johns Hopkins, I had tripped over a couple of papers that sent me down the rabbit hole around caloric restriction and ultimately intermittent fasting. And I became a huge fan of the practice, kicking your body, periodically into autophagy, letting things be recycled a little bit. And so I, early on, we have this platform, we're working with the School of Medicine, and I told my team, I want to build a mobile app. And they said, dude, what the hell does this have to do with anything that we're doing? And, I really wanted to do this almost as a little community service thing. I was really passionate about the practice. I found myself texting my kids. We were texting each other, comparing notes, about how we were feeling after 16 hours or 24 hours or whatever, what we ate to break our fast. And I said, I just want to build a little app, a little, fasting timer. We'll put it out there and maybe a couple thousand people will use it. And because it uses our cloud platform for the back end, for account management, data storage and everything, we'll be getting some free load testing. So I see there's value to us. And they go, I'm not sure I buy that, but okay, you're the CEO, so I guess we'll do it. So we did it. And it's one of those things, odd things in life. We now have over 4 million downloads of that and a successor app. We just kind of touched a nerve. We happened to get published in USA Today, or there's some mention someplace, and things just blew up. And so it left us with these two very different assets, a cloud platform, and then this mobile app. And so that's kind of what led us into patient engagement, that we said, okay, well, we've proven we know a little something about, mobile. We had built really nice social capabilities. People could create circles and interact with each other. There were thousands of public circles. And so anyways, that became kind of another element of our platform, not only kind of the cloud part, but this mobile part that then, so now we're working with healthcare systems that they want to have, their app, that when you engage with that, healthcare network A, that you go to the app store, you download an app, and everything from getting there, finding parking, navigating the building, finding a doctor, scheduling, the prehab, the prep you want to do before chemotherapy or surgery or whatever, and then the recovery plan that is all automated. So that combination of a cloud platform and kind of a mobile platform has really opened up a lot of doors for us.
Yeah, so you never know where opportunity is going to strike, and when that traction hits, very exciting and can often be surprising, not what you think is going to happen either.
Not at all.
Like what you just off exponentially in either direction, right? Like you think it's that J curve and this is everything, and then it doesn't develop, vice versa. Right. You're like, oh, let's just try this, and next thing you know, you're load testing with a million.
Hard to predict. Yeah, we got plenty of load testing, by millions of people around the world. So now we're very confident about the scale of our platform. So that's been wonderful. It's really pushed us.
And something else that I love is that you're eating your own dog food. So that is just whenever possible. So important.
It is. And, the other kind of strategic thing we did was decide that we're not going to try to monetize the data. That the data that goes into our platform belongs to the organization that puts it there. So when, so the platform ended up being so successful on the research side that then they moved it over to the clinical side. So it's being used by oncologists in day-to-day treatment, especially for tough cases, and they've had some wonderful results. We go out every night and scrape, I don't know how many billions of variants that are, growing in public databases daily. So more and more we understand, our genetics. Certainly, more and more in cancer, but now we're starting to be able to use genetics to understand our risk for heart disease, or, my favorite example is Alzheimer's, where it's certainly there's multiple genes that contribute, but the poster child is ApoE. It's a gene, and there are 3 flavors floating out there in the population: E2, E3, and E4. And E4 is the baddie. And if both mom and dad gave you an E4, it means that you've got roughly a 90% lifetime chance of developing Alzheimer's. And I think it's important to know, because 5 years ago, doctors would have said, don't find out. There's nothing you could do. It's just going to make you feel bad. And now we're coming to understand you can do something. You can control your blood sugar better. You can try to be as lean as you can. You can eat more fruits and vegetables. These behaviors. And so, pardon me. So that's kind of the other, maybe the third leg of the stool. So we used the cloud platform and the mobile app to build a general corporate wellness solution, kind of a medical grade corporate wellness solution. We just enrolled 4,000 students at Butler University in Indianapolis this week, where they're really focused on mental health. So now we've got this interesting combination, this cancer-centered cloud platform, really built for the hardest indication in all of medicine. But now we can apply it to cancer, more day-to-day, clinical care for diabetes, heart disease, others, and then into wellness, where the goal is let's prevent people from developing these diseases in the first place. Let's help them understand their risk, because we were all dealt a different deck of cards, a different hand of cards. And so, maybe you never have to worry about heart disease. Your heart is like a fire engine, and you have no genetic risk, but maybe you have cancer risk. And so it's important to know those so that we can focus on, the things we can do to help you prevent developing these diseases.
All right, let's talk about team, because I keep forgetting. So I feel sure you're not going to disagree. So team is critical.
Yes.
And so you have built and headed so many teams, from, I don't know, originally 2 probably when you first got started, all the way up to, you mentioned, in the thousands.
Yeah.
What are some of the elements of success? How do you keep that going? How do you build culture?
Yeah.
Conscious from 2 to thousands. Where are those inflection points where you realize you need to stay on course?
Yeah, at any size, I think what it really boils, and we could talk all day about this. There are a lot of interesting things, but the biggest thing is making people feel like what they do matters. We all want to matter. As human beings, we're on this earth for a relatively short time. And I think we all want to feel like we're doing something that matters. And you spend 8 hours a day or so, 40 hours a week, for many of us, many more hours than that, at work. And I think increasingly, I see this, especially in younger people, they want to feel like, that work part of my life is going towards something that's making a difference. So it comes down to conveying that, look, we're doing something important, we're doing something worthwhile, and what you specifically are doing is making a difference. And it's not opaque, it's recognized. For me, those are the biggest things. We all want that. So just trying to create that visibility. What we do is we have a Monday roundtable for the whole company that's on Slack, and we've got 3 offices. So especially pre-pandemic, there'd be most of the teams in those 3 offices, and we'll bring in users of our stuff. So just a couple of months ago, we brought in a pediatric oncologist talking about how our software helped save the life of a little boy. And boy, telling, if that doesn't get you excited, get you up in the morning. So knowing that the company has a worthwhile mission, and then that what you specifically are doing is contributing to that, and that we know it. So we do status reports where, and I read everyone every week, just a bullet list that we ask everybody to do, so other people can comment. We use Slack for this, but I'm sure you could, use Teams. And then the other big thing we do is we bring everybody out to, or invite everybody out, not everybody wants to come, to Utah once a year. There's a high altitude forest at 10,000 feet, about an hour from here. And we camp for 4 nights, no cell service. We're out in the wilderness at 10,000 feet above sea level. We go rock climbing and, get scraped up and everything, but have a great time. So it's just important to create those bonds, the mission, but really the mission, the recognition, but then the personal relationships too.
Yeah, I think that's really key. At Village, we also spend a good amount of time thinking about how to help everybody connect with that mission. It's something I've always thought, you brought up luck several times. I know that luck makes or breaks us all. But I also think that some of that luck is created. And this is one of those, but well, I'm so biased. I've been in healthcare my whole life, but if I'm working those extra hours or spending all this time and energy, I think every last person who's involved in what we're doing when it's healthcare is, even if it's one step away, is dramatically changing people's lives for the better. And that is something that in our industry you can always rely on, which is lucky, I guess.
It is, and it gives me I'm proud of what I've done before. I've built great companies. We've done, really good work. But, this is a different level of mission that, has me very personally engaged.
Yeah. So we only have about 5 minutes left. If you were to speak to your 25-year-old self, what would you say? I mean, you've had a great career path.
Yeah, I kind of get to do that in some sense in counseling my children. My kids are great. I've got 6 girls and 2 boys. And so I give them some of the advice that I would have given my 25-year-old self. My number 7 is her name is Angie, and she's a planner. She is the most organized person I've ever met, far more so than she'd make a far better CEO. I've told her that many times. She'd make a far better CEO than me. But she wants to plan out every aspect of her life for the next 50 years. And she was getting kind of anxious and nervous about it. And I sat down with her and I said, Angie, the world is changing too fast. I don't know what the world is going to be like in 10 years or 20 years to even give you any advice. And you are going to work yourself into you're going to be so frazzled if you continue to try to do this. My advice to you is take life in chunks. So take this next 5 years and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this degree, or I'm going to go to get this job. And then get to that point and say, okay, what does it make sense to do from here? Because there's just no way that you can possibly know. So that would be the advice I would give myself. And the other one, I've made so many mistakes along the way that I don't want to portray, myself as any sort of, paragon in any way. But the one thing that I think I have done that's helped me is to maintain a love of learning, and to always be learning. So at 66 now, I've got books all over the place, learning French. I know French pretty well, but I'm learning Spanish. So, to have that curiosity about life and about the world, that's the thing, because life can just beat it out of us. And boy, education in particular. I mean, they can take the most fascinating subject in the world, quantum mechanics or biochemistry, and they can make it so dull and lifeless, and memorize these structures, and you lose, that joy about the bigger picture of just the wonder of all of this. And so that would be the biggest advice I could give anybody. Maintain that childlike sense of wonder. Try to remember, what were you like at 5? When you looked up at the night sky, or when you saw a fizzy bottle, explode. How your mind felt at that moment. That's the biggest thing to never lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like choosing the course based on the professor. It's interesting how, yeah.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that you illustrated really nicely this, I guess the only thing that doesn't change is change itself, right? Like, so you reframed early on in the conversation. I said, oh, you're going to spend 5 or 10 years of your life. And in fact, your partner said, give it a try, right?
Yeah,
Give it a
exactly.
year, give it 2 years.
Exactly.
Step
What
by
you got to
step,
lose?
right? And you started off by investing time and money on sequencing and then recognized it's a commodity.
Yeah.
Moved on, right?
Yeah.
So that that flexibility, curiosity, that's a great recipe.
Well, and I think just not beating yourself up when you inevitably screw up, you know, we all do.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. This is
I've enjoyed it.
really fun. So thank you so much for the time.
You bet.
We all appreciate your wisdom.